Why do you say that the VC model in India is not at all good, and it has been just copied, but it is not going to work in India?
So I think the big advantage of Silicon Valley is two things. One is failure is encouraged. Failure is forgiven. Failure is treated as a badge of honor. That's not true in India. If you fail, you become an outcast, a pariah, and no one's willing to give you second chances. So the willingness of entrepreneurs to take experiments is just not there. So you're setting them up in that, you're putting a lot of constraints. And I think the second big problem is the cost of capital. Cost of capital in Silicon Valley is so cheap that people are willing to take these experiments. You will have an asset allocation for alternative investment classes because the amount of money you can make from traditional investments is always going to be capped. So that appetite is there. I think cost for capital in India is much more. And I think, again, always I think, VCs are very hypocritical. They encourage entrepreneurs to take experiments, but they're not willing to take the experiments themselves. So BYJU is doing well, so let me fund another EdTech. Zepto is doing well, so let me fund a Blinkit. This EV guy is doing well, so you're just another Me Too player. You'll make the money. I'm not saying no. There's enough space, but you're not really willing to. At least that's what I feel. I could be wrong.
There's a very FOMO-driven culture in the VC ecosystem, I feel, in the sense that if one big investor is investing money in a startup, then all the small investors would be like, yeah, even I want to participate in this round.
You know what? All they're worried about is the next round. Because that's the short-term thinking. Yeah. So the trouble is, if you take money from Dr. Malpani, you'll mostly have a very hard time raising money the second time around. Because, Dr. Malpani is no network with the VCs or whatever else. Whereas if you raise money from Sequoia, Matrix will give you money because the Sequoia partner will, hey boss, to isko ye de de, aur next time teri company series B kari, to tu mere se paise utha le. So it's all old boys network game, and it's quite easy to manage all the valuations and stuff all the way up. I tell all my entrepreneurs, raise enough money from me so you become financially independent. So you're in charge of your own financial destiny, and you don't need to come back to me, and you don't need to go back to anyone else. Once you're in charge of your own financial destiny, you don't need to take any BS from anyone else. That's the goal. I'm not saying we've reached that. I'm not saying it, but at least that's what you should be aiming for. Maybe you'll need to raise another round. Maybe you'll need to raise another 2 rounds, but make sure that you're sensible. So the one virtue we really emphasize is frugality. Frugality is not a virtue from a VC point of view. A VC needs companies which will blitz scale, which will burn cash, because how else do you go from, they want to go from A to Z. I just want to go from A to B. If you do A to B well, you'll mostly do B to C well, so that by the time you reach Z, your foundation is solid. The moment you burn cash to acquire customers and you go to Z, your foundations are so unstable. You don't have product market fit. You bought it. Then you're fooling yourself. You can fool lots of people lots of the time in this country. I don't think that's a problem.
And what's the average ticket size that you invest in startups?
So it's increased quite a bit now. Okay. God has been kind. Public markets have been kind. It's 2 crores, 3 crores without breaking a sweat.
Okay.
But again, so like I said, even if you think about it, this entire distinction between private markets is such an artificial distinction. A business is a business, boss. It starts from day one serving one customer to serving hopefully 1 million. Yes or no? It's like 5th standard or 6th standard mein bacha to ek hi hai. Just because 1st of December or whatever, 1st of Jan ko he went to a new class, his brain hasn't changed. So again, all these silly things. So we think there is so much startups can learn from the public space. And so much, let me give you an example. At some point, the dream for every startup is to have an IPO and reach that stage. What is corporate governance? How do you repair your MISs? How do you share data? What should you be looking at? What are your comparables? Don't compare yourself with the other startups. Compare yourself with the market leader. And that's the value we can add. Because guess what? We also invested in the private space and the public space. So we can teach them what the right benchmarks are, what you should be looking at. That's as far as the private. The beauty about the public is that because no public market promoter is ever going to give you the time of day. No? Tu hai hi kaun unse baat karne ke liye? They will talk to all the big shot guys. But guess what? 15 years ago, he was in the same position your startup founder is today. So you understand the journey. You understand what he went through. You want your startup founder to learn from that, but it also works the other way. So your ability to ask better questions increases because your startups understand a lot about the technology and the background and why they're doing and where the industry is headed. And guess what? They have a variant perception, which is why they've entered the market. They will give you a lot of interesting insights as an investor. as to why the rest of the market may not be thinking correctly. See, in order to make money, you need two things. You need to be right, but you also need to be contrary. Because if you're only right, you will only make as much money as the market makes. But if you're right and you're contrarian, you will make much more because you've then taken a bet which no one else was comfortable with. So I think so again, for us, all these distinctions are all silly. So you call them startups, you call them SMEs, you call them nano cap, you call them micro cap, you call them small cap, you call them large cap. Is all just convenience, and I get that convenience. But for me, I think that's all a distraction.
And do you think that majority of the Indian unicorns today are just like overvalued Ponzi schemes waiting to crash?
I mean, there's this great James Thurber story about how unicorns are actually fables. And anyway, I won't go into that. But honestly, I think a lot of the horns are very fragile and they've actually just been built up. And I think now retail investors are getting a little bit smarter. That what are these guys doing? Whether it's a VC or a PE player, they're pumping up the story. They're putting in press releases. They're paying for conferences. They're giving all these guys to sell you, wow, we're better than sliced bread. As a result of which you're getting your exit and you're getting this thing. And the trouble is, a new sucker is born every 2 years. No? So someone who burned their fingers with, let's say, the last IPO, by the time this new company comes up, every person thinks I'm the brightest guy. In a bull market, to sab log Rakesh Junjunwala hote hain. To ye to mujhko samajhta hai, this is a great company. So I think all of them will do it. So I'm not saying all of them, but I think a lot of this is hype and hot air. And for whatever reason, the market has been built up to fairly unsustainable levels. And you especially saw that in that SME IPO space, because those are the easiest ones to inflate. And I think they're now collapsing. So hopefully sanity, but this is the nature of the beast. Every bubble will be followed by a bust, will be followed by another bubble. And this has happened through centuries. The one thing which doesn't change, Kushal? Human behavior. So greed and fear are just going to be part of our life. And how it manifests itself is hard to say.
If you learned something new from this video, do share it with your friends and subscribe to this channel so that we can bring you the best content possible. Also, if you want to watch this entire episode, click on the link in the description box and you can go to Kushal Lodha YouTube channel and watch the entire podcast episode. Thank you so much for watching this and have an amazing day.